There has never been more advice about how to be more productive. Better morning routines, time blocking, AI tools that manage your calendar for you, wearables that track your sleep, your stress, your heart rate variability, apps that tell you when you're in flow and when you're not. An entire industry built on the promise that if you just get the inputs right, you'll finally feel on top of it. And most of the people I talk to, founders, leaders, parents trying to hold everything together, people who are all very good at what they do, have tried most of it. And they're still exhausted, still overcommitted, still feeling like they're behind. The problem is not the tools. All of those tools are aimed at the behaviour. They're aimed at what you do. And behaviour is downstream of something else entirely. Something no productivity app could ever touch. That's what this video is all about. I'm Anna Lindberg and I left a career in corporate marketing to go independent. I'll be honest, a lot of what I did in those early years working for myself was exactly what I've just described. Strategies, tactics, frameworks for doing things differently, and a lot of that is useful, but it is only part of the picture. What I kept seeing in my own experience and now in over a decade of working with founders of growing businesses, leaders inside larger organisations and people leaving corporate to build something on their own terms is that you can know a lot of that stuff and still not achieve the change that you're actually trying to make. That question, why, is what hundreds of coaching conversations, years of workshops and the book I'm currently writing have all been circling. This video is where I lay out what I've found. By the end, you'll have a model for understanding why the patterns you most want to shift keep coming back and where the real work actually needs to happen. I want to start by telling you about a client of mine. Now, I'd been working with him for about a year. In that time, we'd addressed a lot of what he'd originally come to me for. He'd stopped working the long nights. He'd shut down a project that had been draining him, something he'd been putting off for a pretty long time. He was finally doing work he loved again, and he had more time for his family, financially more than comfortable. And he felt like it wasn't enough. He felt like he was failing. When we sat with that feeling and started to look at where it was coming from, what we found was this. For him, the feeling of success required a certain kind of pressure, a goal he was pushing himself towards, something keeping him up at night. The sense that he was sacrificing enough, working hard enough, that what he was doing actually mattered. Without that friction, it didn't feel like success. It felt more like coasting. When we dug into where that had come from, relatives who had succeeded or struggled in particular ways, the culture he'd grown up in, the messages he'd absorbed about what hard work meant and what it said about a person, it was all there. He hadn't chosen any of it. It had just accumulated over decades. That's what I call a success script. The inherited beliefs about what success looks like, what hard work requires, what kind of person you need to be, absorbed over decades and never consciously chosen. If you've grown up in a similar context, some version of this probably sounds familiar. The idea that effort is virtue, that if it doesn't cost you something, it probably doesn't count, that success and a certain kind of suffering are connected. Those are scripts, and they show up as that internal voice that says, I should be working harder. I should be further along by now. I should be doing more. I should grow the team. The should is the tell. It feels like your own voice, but it's usually not. So here's what happens when we try to change. Most of us go straight to the behaviour. We set better boundaries, we try a new system, we do the training, and it works for a bit. Then we revert. Here's why. On the surface, you have behaviour, what you do, what's visible to your team, your clients, to yourself, the decisions you make, the habits you repeat, the patterns the people around you can observe. This is where most development work happens. Training, measuring, rewarding, it matters. It's part of the solution, but it's just the surface. Underneath that, you have the scripts, the operating logic, the rules running in the background, surfacing as I have to and I should. I have to be across every decision or things will fall apart. I have to keep proving myself or the work will disappear. I should always be available. That's what being serious looks like. And underneath that is identity. This is where it gets sticky because it's no longer I need to work hard or I should stay late. It becomes I am someone who works hard. I am someone who stays late. I am the person who holds everything together. I am the scrappy founder who figures it all out on their own. Once something has become identity, it's stopped being a thought, it's a lens. You don't decide to take on the extra project, you just take it on. The identity already decided. Your conscious mind arrives afterwards, usually to justify the decision rather than examine it. And all of this sits inside an environment, which is where these scripts came from in the first place. 2 levels. The first is the broader context. For most of human history, work looked very different. It's really only the last few centuries, with the Protestant Reformation and then industrialisation, that work became a moral statement, that your value as a person could be measured in your output, that rest had to be earned. The factory model: show up, clock in, output measured, value proven, worth tied to productivity. Those ideas are woven into the culture that shaped our parents, that shaped us. The second level is personal. You watched how your parents worked, whether they struggled or thrived, what they talked about, what kept them up at night, your teachers, your peer group, your early managers. The company I started my career in had a people-first culture, integrity as a core value, trust as a way of operating. That became my picture of what good leadership looks like. I was lucky. Many people I work with had the opposite experience, a first manager who was command and control, high standards with everything reviewed before it moved forwards. And now they lead their own team the same way. That model got installed early and it stuck. Think about a founder who built a company to 20 or 30 people by being across every decision. That was the script that worked. Know everything, be indispensable, catch what other people miss. And it got results, which is the critical part. Because the brain doesn't file that experience as, that behaviour worked in that specific context. It files it as, this is how I get results, this is how I do it. The results reinforce the script reinforces the identity, and the identity stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a fact. Now the company has grown. New people, new teams, more complexity than any one person can hold. The obvious move is to delegate. So they hire, they bring in training. The training addressed the surface. The hiring was operational. Neither went near the script underneath. If I'm not across it, it won't be right. And the identity underneath that, I am the person who holds this together. So the old behaviour doesn't go away. Which brings us back to my client. When he first came to work with me, the pressure was real. He was building from scratch, carrying the financial weight largely on his own, replacing an employed salary, making it work. In that context, the script, push hard, sacrifice now, success requires this, served him. It got him through that difficult period. But he had succeeded. The business was built. Financially, things were more than comfortable. And yet the script was still running as if none of that had happened. Still pushing him to work long hours. Still measuring him against a standard that belonged to that earlier, harder phase. Through the work we did together, we were able to surface that script and shift it. He stopped working the long nights. He shut down a project that had been draining him for years, and he started focusing on the work he actually loved, with more time for his family. Now, those scripts had served him, they just weren't serving him anymore. So what? Why does any of this matter? Is this just semantics? Is it a bit of a mindset shift I'm talking about? Well, no, here is why this is so important. If the script underneath the behaviour hasn't changed, the behaviour won't change either. You can do the training, you can set the intention, build a new habit, and 6 months later, you're back where you started. You were working at the wrong level. So the real question is whether the scripts you're running still serve you. The ones around success requiring sacrifice, around always being available, around effort being the measure of whether something counts, around needing to be across everything to be sure it's done right. If they're working, keep them. But if they're costing you, if you're working hours that aren't sustainable, if you're starting to feel resentful, if it's affecting your health, your relationships, the parts of your life that matter outside of work, if you're just not enjoying it as much as you thought you would, then it's worth asking whether these scripts still fit where you are now, or whether they belong to an earlier version of your life. Because if they don't fit, there's a different script available, one that belongs to this phase, not that one. The book I'm working on goes into all of this in a lot more depth, the roots of these scripts, the full model, how you go about changing them. In the meantime, I'll be sharing much more here, specific scripts that come up again and again, how to identify them, and what rewriting them actually looks like in practice. Subscribe if you want to follow that, and if you have any thoughts on what I've shared today, whether something landed, whether you recognise any of this in yourself. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one.